Good evening, friends. Good evening, sir.
Hello.
A warm welcome to you back again. So
Thank you.
this is the Guru Purnima series that we will be starting. And sir, it's great to have you on this series. Let's
Great
go
to be
about
here.
yes. Thank you, sir. So what is our today's topic that we are going to discuss?
Well, we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about retrogrades.
Yes.
We're going to talk a little bit about combustion. We're going to talk about transits from the moon and from the ascendant. We're going to talk about what happens when Saturn hits a planet, backs up, hits again, backs up, hits again for the third time. Or for people who use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which I advise, what happens when it hits once, backs up, hits again, backs up, hits again. There's very specific meaning to that. And I'm also going to talk about how to help people. You know, I had a Brigu reading done decades ago. And recently I found, I don't know if it's here. I think I found recently the Hindi. I found the Hindi in there. Okay.
Yes.
This is the Nadi reading for James Braha in August of 1996. And for some reason, I was thinking about this, and I was remembering how some of what they said, you know, I don't understand Hindi, but some of what they said that they wrote in English, I was telling an Indian friend decades ago. It said that I would have a sanstha, meaning an orphanage. And he said, a sanstha is not an orphanage, it's an organization. I said, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And it said I would have a Jyotish organization. It said I would write books, you know, lots of things like that. But suddenly I realized, here I am at Mount Soma. There's a Hindu temple about, I was asking my wife, I said, I tell people it's 1,000 feet away. It's not 1,000 feet. It's about 600 feet from my house. And the pundit is wonderful. And his wife is wonderful. So one day we were walking, and I took the Hindi from the Brigu, and I said, read this. She starts to read it, and she tells me things that were never told to me in the first interpretation. The first thing it said is, this man has a Raja Yoga. I mean, I know I have a Raja Yoga, but that's not the point. The point is it wasn't told to me in the first one. Then it said he will live 80 years. I said, they never told me that. So anyway, one of the things that it said in there was that I would help people in need. And this is something that has been a theme in my practice. And I wind up recommending yagyas a lot. And I wind up recommending gems and mantras. And I wind up recommending therapy systems. In fact, recently, I got an email from an Indian who I had done a horoscope for, and he said, so what are these? No, actually, it was from my book, the Braha Sutras, the new book. He said, so you mentioned, you know, therapy, self-improvement. What kind of self-improvement? So I'm going to talk about the kind of techniques that I recommend, because I don't generally recommend the typical talking therapies, because people can talk and talk and talk and understand the problem, but not solve it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Anyway, before we start, I want to mention that on August 2nd, there are going to be 3 malefics conjunct. This is going to be, technically it's August 2nd, but you have to consider this for about, I would say, from the last week in July, maybe July 27th, all the way to August 5th or 6th, because people can get hit. These planets, they are Mars, Rahu, and Uranus. Whether you use Uranus or not, it doesn't care. It has a big effect. Mars, first of all, when Mars and Uranus are conjunct in a birth chart, that person usually has accidents. They have tremendous physical energy. They cannot sit still. So when Uranus and Mars are in the sky together, there's a lot of fireworks. Okay? But it's not just Uranus, Mars. It's Uranus and Mars and Rahu. Now, in the Hindu Vedic system, it sits around approximate 24, late 24 degrees of Aries. So I'm telling people, warn your clients, look at horoscopes of people you know. If there's a planet in between 23, 24, 25 Aries, it's going to get hit. And it can be a planet, or it can be the ascendant. And in the Western chart, it can be the ascendant degree and the 7th house cusp in the Western. It can be the midheaven and the 4th. But in the Hindu sidereal, it's in 24 degrees Aries. Now, Hindu astrologers know that if they're looking at 23, 24, 25 Aries, they better also look at 23, 24, 25 Libra. It's going to get hit as well. But what they don't know, most of them, unless they know Western astrology, is that the planets that are square to that Aries, square means 90 degrees. So if a person has planets not only in Aries and Libra in the Hindu, but in Cancer and Capricorn, 23, 24, 25 ascendant or planets, they will get hit. If you're looking from the Western system, the aspect occurs 17, 18, 19 degrees Taurus. And in the Western system, you better look at planets in 17, 18, 19 Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. They will get hit as well. So look at those. Now, somebody asked me, what do I think it'll cause war? Do I think, and the answer for me is no, I don't think it'll cause anything that anybody can predict. I've said it 1,000 times. People don't like, I assume they don't like it because they love to hear that you can predict what's going to happen from the planets in the sky. The only thing I found accurate with mundane astrology is planets entering signs. When they do things, weird things in the skies and people make predictions, 90% of the time they fall flat, and the 10% of the time they work, it's pure coincidence. Okay, enough said. So, and everything I'm going to tell you right now is also in the new book, the Braha Sutras, which Westerners get at Amazon, Indians get it at Google Play, or Barnes and Noble, or Apple on iPad, ebooks. But Americans are getting it from Amazon. Okay, not the ebook, but the hardcover. So the retrograde planets. Retrogrades, first of all, you have to remember they are not an affliction. And when I wrote my first book, I learned in 1982 and then 1984. And I actually considered it an affliction. And I used to say to people, why are you saying that the retrograde's afflicted? And I didn't realize they'd seen it in my book because that's as much as I understood at the time. Because if a planet was, retrograde, if it was a benefic and it was retrograde, the effects were not as good as they would otherwise be. Or if Jupiter ruled the 2nd house, money would not necessarily come. It wouldn't hurt the money, but the retrograde, so it's not an affliction. It's passive. It's passive. I hear people all the time, oh, well, I have 3 retrogrades. All right, that means you have 3 planets that are passive. And the houses that they represent are passive, that they rule are passive. And here's the thing. When you have malefics that are retrograde, it's better. Why? If Saturn's in the 1st house, especially close to the ascendant, it hurts. It harms the confidence. If it's retrograde, it's not active. Yes, it hurts the ascendant, not as bad. like maybe half as bad. Now, if Saturn is right on the ascendant and it's retrograde, it doesn't matter. It's going to be devastating because it's right on the ascendant. But if Saturn's 5-10 degrees away from the ascendant degree and it's retrograde, it'll hurt, but not that much. If it's forward moving, it hurts a lot. If Mars is in the marriage house, there's going to be a lot of fighting and friction, and the partner may be aggressive. But if it's retrograde, there'll still be some friction, some fire, some fireworks, but not so big because it's retrograde.
So, sir, do you feel that the energy goes in the 12th house to that retrograde planet?
Say that again.
Like, say, suppose Saturn is in the first house, just like you said. So it does not affect that much to the ascendant, being a malefic. So
it affects the ascendant,
but not that much.
Maybe half as much.
Yeah. So the half energy, does it go to the 12th house to the ascendant of Saturn?
Why would it go to the?
Because it is retro and moving back. That's what the general theories are there.
No. The way it works, that's what they say. The way it works in my experience is a planet only goes into a different house if it is more or less than 15 degrees away from the ascendant. So if the ascendant is, say the ascendant is 9 degrees of Aries, and the Saturn is in 2 degrees of Aries, Saturn's going to be, whether it's retrograde or not, irrelevant. If it's 2 degrees, it's going to. Yeah, but no, I don't believe that because it's retrograde, it hits the other house. No.
Okay.
So, on the other hand, the benefics. If a person has Jupiter in the 10th house, it's great for the career, generally. If it's retrograde, it's not great for the career, it's good for the career. If Venus is in the 5th house, it's good for artistic children, it's good for investments, it's good for happy mind. If it's retrograde, it's good, but not great. It's just less. Now, if the ruler of the 1st house is retrograde, now look, of course you have to look at the whole chart. If there's 5 planets aspecting the 1st house, and the ruler is retrograde, there's still going to be a strong 1st house. But here's the thing. If the 1st house ruler is retrograde, the person doesn't need recognition. They don't crave recognition because it's more passive. This is, it's very interesting when people ask me, I'll say something and they'll say, is that good or bad? And I say, rocks are hard and water is wet. If you think wet is good, then water is good. If you think wet is bad, then water is bad. Most of the things, many of the things are neither good nor bad. Shakespeare said, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Okay, so it gives a lot of freedom. The person's not craving recognition if the 1st house ruler. Now, if that 1st house ruler is retrograde and the person does want recognition, it's a little bit harder. And if the person has, say that they have a Jupiter dasha coming and Jupiter rules the 1st house and it's in a good house, I will tell them it's a good planet. I don't see any malefics aspecting it, but don't expect all of a sudden everything good is going to happen because it's retrograde. It's slow, it's passive. And what I say is, if you want the benefits of that Jupiter in the 11th house for money or friends, and it's retrograde, you have to activate it. So this is the benefit of astrology, is knowing what's happening. So now you know that this is a 16-year period for friends and groups, but it's retrograde. So if you want friends and groups, now you go out looking for them. If you want large sums of money, now is the time to start pursuing large sums of money. But if you think, oh, large sums of money are going to come in, friends are going to come in immediately. If it's retrograde, not so. It's like that. And then at the same time, if Saturn is in the 4th house, but it's retrograde, and you're expecting, oh my God, I'm going to have terrible times with my mother's going to die, I'm going to have bad with land and real estate, whatever. If it's retrograde, it's much more passive. Now, most important about this is to understand the rulerships. It's very important to know how the planet's going to react in a dasha. If it's retrograde, passive. If it's not retrograde, it's going to burst forth with energy. The most interesting thing to me about the retrogrades are the houses that they rule. So if the retrograde planet rules the 1st, they don't need recognition, and it's not going to come so easily. It may come from the career house, but not from the personality. If the ruler of the 2nd house is retrograde, and you think they're going to be a writer or a teacher, or you think that they're going to be very active at going for money, it's not going to happen because it's retrograde. So what happens is they may have Jupiter and Venus in the 2nd house, or they may have Jupiter and full moon aspecting the 2nd house. But because the ruler is retrograde, in the first 30 years, people are living their life on instinct, on what they love. They don't think a lot in the early years. Oh, I like this, I like that, I don't like this, I don't like that. But they don't think, wait, I don't like that, but it could be very good for me. They don't think like that. They get to 27, 28, 29. The Saturn return is from 29 to 31. That's when adulthood kicks in. When you get to 29 to 31, that's the Saturn return. Saturn comes back to its natal placement. Then you have 2.5 years where you are pressured to let go of all the things that are nice and fun and exciting, but not important. And you let go of those and you set the priorities. That's when the person says, you know, I have this ability to make money. I've just never focused on it. You know, I have great writing skills. I've just never cared about it. Then they do something about it. If the ruler of the 3rd house is retrograde, then with the arts and with mechanical technical skills, they don't necessarily go for that. But then when they get old enough, they realize, wait a minute, I have, if they have talent, they don't, not everybody has talents just because the planet's retrograde. But if the house is strong and the ruler is retrograde, they start to realize it. If the 4th house is retrograde, they don't care about land and real estate so much till they get older. If the 5th house is retrograde, they may not have children, even though there's a good planet in the 5th house. It doesn't mean they won't have children. It means it's a choice. They can wait. If the ruler of the marriage house is retrograde, there's not such a large chance that they meet someone and just love at first sight. It's not like that. It's a slower process. If the 10th house ruler is retrograde, then the career, fame in the career is not so important. I mean, it's important. Everybody wants a career, but they don't crave fame and recognition if their ruler is retrograde. Now, so to me, the planet that is retrograde gives a lot of free will. When you see a person with 3 planets retrograde, not Rahu or Ketu, when you have 3 planets retrograde, you usually have 5 or no, Sun and Moon don't go retrograde. You have 6. If you have 3 retrogrades, you have 6 houses ruled by a retrograde planet. All of those 6 houses, you don't really get the benefits of them. You don't see the benefits till you're in your late 20s. And even then, it's not that you hit that age and the benefits come. It's that you start to realize, oh, I could do this, like that. So the person that has lots of retrogrades in the chart, 2 or 3 is a lot. 2 retrogrades means 4 houses retrograde, the rulers. 3, okay. So that person, first of all, is likely to be a looker rather than a doer. They are looking and analyzing and looking and analyzing. And they become brilliant at analyzing, not necessarily doing. So my teacher, Padilla, used to say, it makes the person very critical. But he didn't mean in a negative way. They could be in a negative way because they can see what's going on by like that. Now, it's really, really, really crucial to understand what makes a retrograde planet powerful and passive. This is in my book, the Braha Sutras. I don't know the number. I get emails from people. I love Sutra 37. I don't know what 37 is. I have to go to the book and look at what is Sutra 37. Anyway, so there's a whole sutra in there about, I was very surprised when I learned Jyotish that in Shadbala, the sixfold source of strength, it's a whole calculation system. In that system, the retrograde gains power. And I said, the retrograde gains power? It's passive, it does less active, it's powerful. Okay, why? The retrograde planet is closer to the Earth. If Venus is retrograde, it's closer to the Earth than usual. If Jupiter is retrograde, it's closer to the Earth than usual. That's going to have a significant psychological effect. And I'm using the word psychological, behavioral, inner. In the outer world, it is not going to be more powerful. So here's what happens. What happens is that a child is born, and the first 6 or 7 years basically forms the whole personality. What happens in those first 6 or 7 years is so critical. If you have poverty and bad parents are bad in those 5 or 6 years, your whole life you're going to expect bad results. So they're critical. But as you're going through those early years, you're learning about Mercury. You're learning about speaking and communications. You're learning about the moon, which is the feelings. You're learning about fighting, arguing and fighting and trying to get your way from Mars, right? Let's say that you have Jupiter in the horoscope retrograde. It's passive. It's under the surface. You're not experiencing it. You're not seeing it. It's passive. So you learn about communications. You learn about love, romance, mother and emotions, fighting and friction. And then all of a sudden, at some point, later than all the others, suddenly religion is presented to you. Now, religion may have been presented when you were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, but you don't notice it. It goes right through you because Jupiter's retrograde. You have nothing, it has nothing to hold on to, right? But at some point, as you begin to develop, and now you're using your intelligence more, suddenly you say, what? Religion, faith? What is faith? And then what happens is, it's a shock. It's shocking because you thought you knew everything, all the different areas you thought you knew about them. You knew nothing about religion and philosophy. And the rest of your life is spent analyzing everything. Okay, I'm in love with this woman. How is this going to be spiritually? How is this going to be philosophically? What does this mean? What's the meaning of like that? If Mars is retrograde, then you know nothing about fighting, you know nothing about sexual energy, you know nothing about being assertive and aggressive. And then after all the planets you've seen, and then suddenly you find out about fighting. What happened? There's a fight. There's sex. Oh my God, sex. And then the rest of your life, that becomes very important psychologically. So this is, if someone has Venus retrograde, well, this is hard to say because so few horoscopes are good with love and marriage. But when you see a planet with Venus is retrograde, almost always there's a very complex married life and love relationship. And they're trying to understand love in this lifetime. I always theorize, and I'm very careful not to make, absolute statements about things that can't be proven. But I always theorize that if a person has a retrograde Venus, they had many lifetimes in the past where Venus was misused in some way. And in this lifetime, they want to learn the proper use of Venus. So it's retrograde. So everything gets, the whole life is seen in the context of love. Or in my case, Jupiter is my only retrograde planet. Everything is seen in terms of philosophy. You'll see a lot of spiritual students with the retrograde Jupiter. So, so that's basically how it works. And if a planet is, the thing is, when you're looking at planets near a retrograde planet, you want to look at whether the retrograde planet is applying or separating. So if Saturn is 10 degrees Taurus, retrograde, and Venus is 8 degrees Taurus, Saturn's backing up into that Venus, that's going to hurt worse. If Saturn's backing away and Venus is past Saturn, then they're separating. Yeah. Now they're both going to be, if the degrees are tight, the aspect is going to be there. There's no question. But if there's two people and one has Saturn 2 degrees retrograding into Venus, the other Venus is past it, the person with it past it is going to have an easier time. There's no question. Yeah. So
very beautiful.
Yeah. So that's it's so important to understand, because you're looking at a horoscope where there's, the moon and the ascendant ruler benefics are both in the 6th house, and you think it's a doctor or someone who's going to have a hotel or a motel or a restaurant, but they don't. And you go, why not? Because the ruler is retrograde. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't. It means they may not. But you never, if there's a planet in the 5th house and the 5th ruler is retrograde, I never say you are definitely, Venus is in the 5th, you are definitely going to have an artist child. I would never say that. I would say, if you decide to have children, the child will be artistic or mathematical because it's Venus, like that.
So do you consider retrograde planets past life, that we get these retrograde because of our past karmas?
Everything in the horoscope is a result of the past lives. Everything. I'm very, very, very careful because we can't prove it. Like I say, I suspect that someone like me, where Jupiter's retrograde, I may not have had a good, proper, balanced religion philosophy. I want to get it balanced. I want to get it, so now it's, but I'm not going to say absolutely. I say it may be like that. Okay. It may be like that. Where I will, people say, oh, can you tell me about my past lives? I say, not really, because there's no way to prove it. But if the money house is terrible, you probably misused money. If I had a horoscope, I read a horoscope for someone a couple months ago or a month ago, and the 7th house was a mess. It was just a mess. And I said, obviously, you harmed others you harmed marriage partners in past lives. Now it's coming. Said, no, I don't think I did harm someone. That's what they said. I said, okay, that's perfectly plausible. If you believe that, that's fine. That means that you believe that life is random, which, believe me, is perfectly possible. I don't believe that. I believe that we've had past lives and everything we do comes back. That's a belief. I can't prove it. That's my belief. but I just say, okay, that means if you have a bad house of children and you don't think that you did something bad with children, that means that you think that life is random. Because I could have told you that as soon as you were born, I could have told you trouble with children. So either that's random or it's because of past lives. Now, I will tell people the chart as a whole represents your past, and you can't say, is it the very last life before this? Is it an amalgamation? I had a guru and he used to say, it's like you have a mountain of karma and you grab one chunk and you go, but who knows? It's very hard to know. Now, what I will say about past lives, the closest I will get is to say the fifth house is Purva Punya, past life credit or debt. So if you have Mercury in the fifth house and it's exalted and it rules the second house and it rules the fifth house, then since it's in the house of past life credit and it's in a good sign, it means that you must get money and you must get good children and you must get good intelligence because you did the work in past lives and now it must occur. Now you could have Jupiter in the 10th house, and I would say generally that's good karma for career from past lives, etc. But I'm not going to say you must get career success because you earned it in past life. I won't say that. If it's in the fifth house, if the ruler of the 10th, like mine, the ruler of my 9th house and the ruler of my 10th house is in the house of Purva Punya, aspected by Jupiter. It's the first thing Padya said. He came to my room and he said, I think you must deserve to get higher knowledge because I'm coming to you. Because he told me, I said, where do you live? He said, no, it's too hard. I'll come to you. He gets there and he says, you must deserve to get knowledge. I'm coming to you. Let's see. The 9th ruler in the 5th house, aspected by the degree to the degree by Jupiter. And the career, success in the career, because it's in the house of Purva Punya. And from the age of, I gained fame at the age of 35, 36 with my first book. From the age of 28 or 29, in my head, I said, you're supposed to be famous. You're supposed to be famous. You're supposed to be famous. And that was the first or second question I asked Padya. I said, I have this feeling I'm supposed to be famous, but it never happens and it's driving me nuts. And he said, when you're 35, 36, Saturn is in the house of Purva Punya. It rules the career. It's aspected by Jupiter to the degree. When you're 35, 36, your career kicks in. And then suddenly I write the book and suddenly the career begins. And this is something also, you must learn the great years of the planets. You must learn them because, if a person's ascendant is Mars, and Mars, the great year of Mars is the 28th year. So between 27 and 28, the person knows who they are. If, Venus is the 25th year, between 24 and 25, you often find the ruler of the first house, when that year comes up, they make massive decisions. They get divorced, they get married, they choose a certain career. But if that planet's afflicted, it's a very bad year. If it's afflicted, it's very bad. So those, Jupiter is the 16th, the sun is the 22nd, the moon is the 24th, Venus is the 25th, Mars is the 28th, Mercury is the 34th, Saturn's the 36th, Rahu's the 42nd, and Ketu is the 48th. So Rahu kicks in the 42nd year between 41 and 42, and Rahu is worldly power. Now, if Rahu's in the 2nd or the 8th, that 42nd year may be nasty, may be rough, because that's a rough placement for Rahu and Ketu. But if Rahu is in the 10th, there could be big career rise. If it's in the 1st, there could be some fame. It just depends what it's doing. Ketu matures the 48th year. Person starts to get some psychic, metaphysical energy, like that. So let's talk now about people and their problems.
Yes.
So if you're going to do astrology, there's really no point in doing it unless you can help people, unless you can guide people. I mean, I have a chart in a day or two where the person's going into a 17-year Mercury dasha, and Mercury is in a bad sign right next to Saturn, right next to Mars, and the dasha hasn't begun. This is not fun for me. It's not fun. So you have the yagyas. The yagyas are, that's one of the most important things. But there's also, there's therapy systems. I mean, in this case, you're talking about a very karmic situation. And so in that case, I'm going to say to go get yagyas 3 days or 9 days. When you get yagyas, in a case like that, one yagya is not going to fix the problem. Now, in that Mercury dasha, they could suddenly have huge problems. They could have problems with communications, their depression, mental depression. There could be all kinds of problems. And you do one yagya. And if you get it from a good company, and this is critical, you cannot go to any company to get a yagya. You have to know what you're doing. And so you get the one yagya. This happened recently. There was a kid who was in college and he was failing. He just stopped working. He shut down. He did a yagya. Everything turned around. Now he's going back into college. But guess what? His problems have come back. He fixed that problem, but now his problems have come back. So you have to do regularly. If you're in a bad period, whether it's a sub-period or a dasha, if you have a period of a year of a bad planet, I would say you need to do 2 or 3. If you're in a dasha, you need to do 2 or 3 a year. I used an organization in the 1990s and the 2000s, and the yagyas were pretty good. They were okay. And then I don't know what happened. Something happened to the guy, and I just stopped using them because something was going wrong in there. They weren't doing what they should be doing, which happens. Power corrupts. The organization that I use now, I could tell you 5 stories off the top of my head, people getting yagyas and getting good results. That doesn't mean that the problems are over. They have to keep doing them. But I'm just going to put this on the screen so people don't email me, because they email me asking. This is the
OR6.
Yeah.
www.bhavna-yajna OR6.
What's that?
OR6.
That's organization.
Yes, OR6.
ORG.
ORG, right.
Organization. Yeah. Anyway, the woman that runs that place, the reason that she got into that business, she's a Westerner. She went to India because she found out that there were organizations doing yagyas and the pundits were doing bad things. They weren't doing the right thing. And when she went to India, she had to go to many different organizations before she found ones that were honest, had integrity, where the person in power treated the pundits properly. So I get very good results in that. Anyway, so without the yagyas, I wouldn't want to be doing astrology. What do you do when you see these problems? Now, the other thing that you have is when a person's moon is afflicted, badly afflicted, that means the nurturing in childhood was bad. And that's going to create problems throughout the entire life because of confidence, because of feeling I don't deserve love, I don't deserve money, right? So there's hundreds of different therapeutic systems. And I tell people, go looking for yourself, find the one you like. But many people won't even bother. So I tell them the 2 that I like. I used to recommend a lot more I've gotten older. I simplified it to these two. One is called bioenergetic analysis. Bioenergetic analysis. It's based on the work of Alexander Lowen, who was a colleague or student of Wilhelm Reich. And Wilhelm Reich discovered that when you had emotional, psychological problems, they would live in the body, in the physical body. So with Reich, they used to do what's called Reichian therapy, not Reiki, but Reichian therapy, but there's very little of that anymore. The Alexander Lowen system is a little bit more gentle. And so that's the bioenergetic analysis. They will talk to you, but they will be looking at your physical body to see where the body has stored where the muscles have tightened up and where the stress is stored. And they'll give you emotional exercises, smashing a pillow, yelling and screaming, looking in someone's eyes and explaining what happened, like that. It's a very good system. If you do that 6 months or for 6 months or a year, you're likely to solve a lot of the problems. The other system is called rebirthing. Rebirthing. It's a breathing technique where they show you the way that you breathed when you were a child. And there's a certain way that you breathe that's a little bit different than when you're older. And they have you breathe that way for about 30 minutes on a bed or a couch, and they're guiding you through this breathing process. And you do 10 sessions. And when you're doing that kind of breathing for 30 minutes, it starts to unlock memories that were lost. It happened to me. I went to rebirthing. I had been divorced. I was married from 23 to 28, and I was single from 28 to 42. I have 4 planets in Libra in the Western system. That's all relationship. I hated every minute of being single. But every time I would get attracted to someone, the same old unworkable pattern was there. Okay? There was no emotional depth to the relationship ever in those years. In the 6th or 7th session of rebirthing, a memory came back and I started weeping. I started sobbing. I remembered my mother not letting me go. She psychically wasn't letting me begin to have my life. Well, I never got near another woman where there was any emotional depth, because I didn't want that happening again. As soon as the memory came, and I remembered, I didn't have words for it when I was 5 or 4. I didn't have words for it. I just knew something was, but after that, as soon as that was over, immediately, suddenly the relationships had a lot of depth, and within 2 years I was married. So it unlocks those things, and that's called rebirthing. And there are books by a woman named Sondra Ray, Sondra Ray, I Deserve Love, Loving Relationships. When you find clients where they don't have money, they don't feel they deserve money, so they never get money, they don't have love, or they have partners that don't treat them well, it's always the moon they feel they don't deserve. That has to be healed. Otherwise, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to go through the rest of their life. Now, there is a sutra in the book about working on yourself. Okay? When you have problems that involve other people, you cannot change the other person. If they're not treating you well, you can't stop it. If they're acting this way, you can't stop them. But you're the one suffering because of what they're doing. So you go to bioenergetics, you go to a therapist, you go to a psychologist, you go to rebirthing, and you work on yourself. Why am I with this person that's treating me like that? Why am I suffering because my partner or my child isn't doing what I want them to do? Why am I suffering about their life? This is something that clients don't usually want to hear. Wait a minute, you mean I'm responsible? They're doing the bad stuff. Why am I because they're in your life. You're the common denominator. And if you weren't with them doing it, you'd be with someone else doing it because you're the common denominator. So you have to work on yourself. Now, another thing is, so when you have an afflicted second house, that's bad family life. Now, the bad family life is usually going to be in the first 18 years, when you're being raised. To some extent, it can go over to the marriage and that family, but it's not so likely. In maybe 25-30% of the cases, it continues. That's if the second house is like Rahu and Mars and Saturn. If they have like 3 malefics in the second house, the upbringing, the 18 years is going to be just hellish. But when they move into a marriage and they have family life, it's not going to get much easier with those kind of malefics. And if they have Mars in the second house, Mars and Ketu, Mars and Rahu, they're going to be arguing, bickering. And I tell them, look, there's no point in bickering. It's not going to fix anything. So you have to leave space. You have to leave space for the little irritations rather than ruining your relationships with your family because of those little irritations like that. Another thing that I talk about is people that have children with really massively activated 8th houses. If you have a child, boy or a girl, it's worse with girls, but if you have any child, Venus and Jupiter, a full moon in the 8th house, they're bursting with energy, and it's very sexy. It's very sexy. The 8th house is not sexual, sexy meaning very attractive, sexy, attractive. Those people are the ones that are more likely to get assaulted or raped. It's not their fault. It's just that there's so much energy coming out that these bad people see, oh my God, look how sexy that person is. So you have to be, when you have children, you have to be very, very careful. And if you see a client that's got, some really massively powerful 8th house, you can ask them, did you ever get sexually assaulted? Now, the thing is, the numbers of women getting sexually assaulted is so high, but when you see that massively strong 8th house, the likelihood is much stronger. Yeah. And then also, when you're looking at the kind of person that needs therapy, that needs rebirthing, that needs bioenergetic analysis, that needs help, you can't do this alone. You've got to have help. Meditation is good, but meditation is more spiritual. It doesn't get to the psychology. It gets rid of neurotic tendencies, but not the really deep emotional damage. It doesn't usually get that. And so the first thing that you're looking at is you see a very bad second house. So the family life at home was terrible, fighting of the parents and stuff like that. The next thing you see is the moon is very afflicted. So they didn't have any good nurturing. That's devastating. But the other thing is the 4th house, the moon and Mercury. The 4th house and Mercury, both, even without the moon, 4th house and Mercury. If they're very, very bad, there's going to be some damage with the mother. And you have to understand this also. When you have a bad 4th house, it doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship with your mother was bad. It could mean that your mother's life was disastrous. Here's the important thing. If the mother's life was disastrous, and you're talking to a woman client, that woman's going to have problems. The mother could have been very loving, but very, very terrorized. The mother could have had a horrible childhood. If the mother's not functioning well, even though she's treating the daughter well, the daughter is taking her cues on life. The daughter is looking at the mother and seeing how life is going to be, and they take on, even though the relationship is good, they have problems. With the father, With the father, it's really a little bit harder with the father because you have the 9th house and Jupiter and the sun. The sun is the Atma Karaka and it's the Karaka of father, and the 9th house and the Karaka for the 9th is Jupiter. So if the sun, Jupiter, and 9th house are very, very bad, there's going to be problems with the father. Now, if it's a man having that, that's going to be more devastating because he's looking at his father to be like him. But then you also have the 10th house, the sun, and Saturn. So it's a little bit harder with guys because there's so many things to look at. But those are the things that they're going to need to work on. You know, those are the people that are going to need to, you know, those need help, you know, from outside help, basically. And when somebody says that they're meditating, but you notice that their behavior doesn't seem, they seem as neurotic as ever, what kind of meditation are you doing? Oh, I sit with my eyes closed. Well, that's not going to do it. There's mantras. There's all kinds of different techniques, and those are important.
Yes. So which mantra do you do yourself, or a basic mantra that everyone can do?
Oh, I don't think I'm the right person for that. I'll tell you maybe in the next interview. I don't know.
No.
There are. I mean, look, there's all kinds of mantras. Om Namah Shivaya. There's a million different mantras, but I'm not really. I'm not quite. I mean, I do transcendental meditation, so I have my own mantra. You know, I did so many different techniques. I have a lot of. I have planets in the 6th house, especially in the Western. Sun, Neptune, Mercury in the 6th house, sextile to Pluto in the house of self-improvement. And Pluto is my strongest planet. So as soon as I was 19, 20 years old, I spent the next 30 years doing every self-improvement thing I could do. And in the end, the first one that I did, transcendental meditation, I found to be the most powerful. But that's meditation. It helps with neurotic tendencies. But when the people are suffering, they need more than that. They need help. They're not going to do it on their own. They need help.
Very beautiful session.
Okay.
Yes. We'll do combustion next time because it'll be a big topic, I think, just like retrograde. So we can do a complete combustion.
Oh, combustion. The thing is, you mentioned, I don't really have that. To me, I don't have much to say about combustion. It's just another affliction. It's a planet that gets burned. So look, if it's Venus, it gets burned. If it's the moon, it gets burned. If it's Jupiter, it gets burned. But you have to apply the fire to the, in other words, if it's Venus with the sun, you'll notice that the relationships burn out. When Venus is with the sun, the person is very beautiful. They are very charmed. They feel good inside, but the relationships, they're like a match. It like that, and then it goes out. It burns out. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have too much to say about combustion, but it's an affliction, and the closer it is, you know, 2, 3, 4 degrees, the worse it's going to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Very beautiful session, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yes. Viewers, this is a beautiful session with lots of remedies given by sir. Self-help. You need to go and if you want help, you need to go and listen what sir has told. Those will give you tremendous relief. Apart from meditation, these are a must-do things if your life is a mess. Plus a wonderful session on retrograde planets. I loved it, sir. Thank you so much.